Welcome to the 8th Annual College of the Atlantic Summer Institute. Welcome back to everyone who was able to be here yesterday evening, and welcome to all of you who are just joining us for the first time. I might be a fresh face to you. My name is Sylvia Torti, and I'm the new president of COA. Thank you. Last night, we heard a vigorous conversation around philosophical and procedural issues related to constitutional amendments at the federal and the state level. I'm really looking forward to our next session, States, the Front Lines of Democracy. And to introduce this session, I'd like to welcome Nicole Grahowski. Nicole is our state senator from District 7. She is also our energy project manager here at College of the Atlantic. It's rare, I think, to have a state senator who's thinking and crafting policy and at the same time doing groundwork. Thank you, Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to echo Sylvia's warm welcome to everyone who's joining us here on campus and everyone that's also joining us virtually. As you heard, my name is Nicole Grahowski, and in addition to working here at the college, I have the distinct honor of serving as state senator for 22 towns in this beautiful region. As a state senator, I have a great deal of interest in this morning's conversation topic, states, the front lines of democracy. As the federal government shifts more responsibility to the states, we are on the front lines of many issues. But overarching all of the issues and our ability to work together towards solutions is whether or not we have a healthy democracy. But how do we define a healthy democracy? Do we measure it by voter registrations and turnout on election day? Certainly, that's part of the equation. If people cannot participate because they have been disenfranchised, that's a sign that our democracy is under threat. If people do not participate because they are disillusioned, that is also problematic. And democracy is about more than just voting. It's about robust discourse, conversations like this Summer Institute inspires. Learning with and from each other, even when we have different experiences and ideas. Coming together to improve life in our neighborhoods, towns and cities, counties, states, and ideally across our country. State leaders have a role to play, not just in administering free and fair elections, but in modeling productive dialogue and establishing norms that strengthen our democracy. And as active participants in our democracy, we all have a responsibility to do the same and to hold each other accountable when we fall short. Our two guests this morning have dedicated their careers to strengthening our democracy in fundamental ways. It is my honor to welcome them to share their own insights about how state government can and should protect and promote our democracy. Leading us through this morning's conversation is Joanna Lydgate, who is the CEO of States United Democracy Center, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to protecting free, fair, and secure elections. Joanna has an impressive career path focused on protecting civil liberties and the rule of law. Joining Joanna is Michigan's 43rd Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. Secretary Benson is a national leader in protecting election integrity, ballot access, and civil rights, not only in her role as secretary, but also in her previous work as Dean of Wayne State University Law School. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Joanna Lydgate and Secretary Jocelyn Benson onto the stage to hear their thoughts from the front lines of our democracy.
Wow, thank you so much. My organization, States United, we're spread all across the country. And once a year we get together and we go somewhere with a beautiful view and we talk shop and just enjoy each other's company. And we've taken to calling it Democracy Camp. So I feel like this is a different version of Democracy Camp. I'm so grateful to the organizers, to COA, and to all of you for being here to talk about what I think is really the most critical issue we face right now as a country, the protection of our democracy, the health of our democracy, and our free and fair elections. And there is no one better to talk about that than Secretary Benson, my good friend, and one of our democracy heroes in this country. We'll talk about the work she did in 2020 and 2022, protecting, not just protecting elections, but actually overseeing record turnout in Michigan, the most secure elections that you all have had, and the work you do with your colleagues across the country. My background, I served as the Deputy Attorney General for the state of Massachusetts for many years. And so my career has been about seeing the power of the states for good in this country, and in particular, the power of statewide officials. So the organization I founded works with governors, state attorneys general, and secretaries of state to protect elections, to defend strong election laws and election results, to prevent political violence, which is an increasing problem in this country, and fight election-related disinformation. And over the course of the work I did in the Attorney General's office, building the case against Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family, on behalf of the state, challenging the Defense of Marriage Act and helping to bring marriage equality to the country, really got to witness how much state officials hold our rights and freedoms in their hands. And that's really nowhere more true than when it comes to elections. So let's talk a little bit about what you do as Secretary of State. I think there was probably a long time in this country where most people didn't really know what their secretary did. You wrote a book about the important role of secretaries of state and sort of a premonition of what was ahead. And in 2020, we watched secretaries across the country defend our votes, defend our system. So walk us through kind of what your job is all about, how it works, and what this election season is looking like for you, which, by the way, thank you so much for making the trip here to Maine in the midst of a really busy time.
Well, whenever Joanna Lydgate asks me, I say yes. So it was easy, and it's really wonderful to be here with all of you. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this important conversation that whether we're in Maine or Michigan or California or Florida, we all have a role to play in this critical moment in the history of our country's democracy. And so I'm grateful for all of you for being here as well to be part of this conversation. For me, I started my career as a civil rights lawyer. Actually, I worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. And in particular there, it really investigated extreme right-wing groups that were committing hate crimes across America. And doing that work and then subsequently going to law school to do civil rights law really illuminated to me that the crowning achievement of the civil rights movement was the Voting Rights Act and all the sacrifices that led to the Voting Rights Act being enacted. Of course, what happened in Selma, Alabama in 1965 really inspired me with a sense of responsibility to continue that work, knowing as I learned through the law that there was so much that was being done in the legal system to diminish that promise of one person, one vote in our Constitution. And so I thought I could just sue my way to equality, that was how I was going to contribute to enforcing the constitutional protections of our country. And then the 2000 election happened. And we saw really for the first time how a Secretary of State in Florida, Katherine Harris, stopped a recount from happening that likely would have shown Al Gore had won Florida. And thereby, in doing so and stopping that recount, which was later upheld by the US Supreme Court, she changed the course of American history. And though that may seem quaint, given all that we've experienced in recent years, in my view, it really illuminated and underscored how important these state officials are and how important it is that we as voters understand who we are electing and supporting and really demand that they follow the law without fear or favor, without partisanship, but be professional in their jobs. And so I wrote a book in 2008, went around the country, interviewed every Secretary of State to really tell the story of what a professional, nonpartisan Secretary of State would do, and how many things they could do to actually expand access to the vote and protect the security of the process. And then I was so inspired, really, my last interview was with Jennifer Brunner in Ohio, who was secretary at the time. And I was so inspired by her work and everything she'd been able to do, that I remember turning off the recorder and saying, okay, I want to do this job. What do I do? And that meant I had to run for office, which I had never done before. But I, through many different ways, had learned that running for office doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to seem inaccessible to those of us who haven't done it before. And we don't necessarily have to run to win. We just run to raise awareness about the issues we care about and educate citizens, voters, about their power in our democracy. I lost that election in 2010. Every Democrat on the ballot lost in 2010, not just in Michigan, but nationwide in many places. But the amazing thing happened. I actually outperformed everyone else on the ticket by 15 points. The governor had lost by 18 points. I only lost by 3 or 4. And what that showed was that when you actually just make the case to citizens that they have power and autonomy to save their democracy, and you're willing to step up and be a part of that work, that people respond and embrace that responsibility. And so 8 years later, when I ran and won in 2018, I do think at that point, everyone in Michigan was like, just let her have the job already. Like she clearly really wants it more than anyone else. In 2018, like I didn't even have any opponents on any side, really. But it was a great experience being elected with our amazing governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and our extraordinary Attorney General, Dana Nessel, becoming part of the first trifecta, the Women of Michigan, in our state, which now transformed into a trifecta of all branches of state government led by women. But what it really was a reminder of what can happen when we simply just step into what we want to do, follow our gut, follow our instinct, and do what we love. I was able to then be elected and be in a position that I am in now in this really unreal moment in American history, not just the last week, but the last several years. And it's been an honor to do that work. And really, but by the time 2020 hit, I was ready to go and ready to fight and ready to persevere and ensure that no one was going to stand in the way of the votes of our people and our democracy.
Let's talk about the trifecta, because I love that. And we at States United, we work in a lot of the most critical states. One of my favorite places to work, don't tell our other clients, is Michigan. And in part, that's because you guys have this incredible, just kick-ass team. And each of you has an important role to play when it comes to elections and election administration. The governor helps to set policy, budgets, certifies results. You oversee really the entirety of the election process, working with counties and local officials. And the Attorney General defends election laws, election results. We watched her have to do that in 2020. What does it mean for you to have this team? We talk about democracy as a team sport. What does it mean for you to have that team of colleagues? And how do you work together to make sure that the process is free, fair, and secure?
Yeah, I think it's been one of the greatest. I mean, I tell Gretchen and Dana this all the time. The greatest things about my job is that I get to work with them. I don't have to watch my back with our other elected officials. I know they have my back instead, and we have each other's backs. It's really been a testament to how well women can and do lead together, and it's been. Our friendship, our allyship with each other and others is one of the reasons we've not only been successful ourselves, but if you've been watching Michigan, we've actually multiplied. There's now a woman leading in the Senate Majority Leader seat. There is a majority of women on the Michigan Supreme Court, including a female Chief Justice. And so we are building and expanding on our leadership and empowering women at the local level as well, mayors, other public servants. So all that to say is it's made it a joy to kind of see our camaraderie, our connectivity, and work together and work in our respective lanes. We all have responsibilities to do, and we all ran for these positions because we really wanted to do our jobs. As an aside, we're all facing term limits now in a few years, and there are moments. I was actually just talking to Dana the other night, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if we could just keep doing these jobs? Because we love our work, and that's part of the reason why we've been able to work together so well. But we've also come under, really unique scrutiny, I guess you could say, or attacks in another another way to say it. There was one week in May of 2020 where on Monday, then President Donald Trump attacked Governor Whitmer. On Wednesday, he attacked me. And then by Friday, he had attacked Dana too, with, Twitter, because that's how it was done back in 2020. But at the same time, it was really harrowing, one, as an individual, to be like, the president of the United States is saying awful things about me on social media, which is surreal. And also to look to the women I was serving with and see them dealing with the same things. I wasn't alone. I had them to lean on. And we locked arms and fought back together. And we're much more potent and powerful than any of us could be as individuals. And so that was really illustrative, I think, of that power of sisterhood. I went to Wellesley also. So I was like, I knew the power of sisterhood deep down in my soul, but to actually live it as a leader in the state of Michigan has been, again, one of the best things about public service for me in this moment.
Looks like you're not the only Wellesley person in the audience. So I want to talk in a minute about the threats that you've dealt with and the sort of climate that we are operating in right now. But I also want to emphasize States United, we're a bipartisan organization, and we work with Republicans and Democrats across all of our states. We just work with pro-democracy officials. And in 2020, I think we all watched some really brave Republicans stand up and speak truth about our elections. I know in the work that you do, you work a lot with county officials and on both sides of the aisle. These are people who have done these jobs for a long time. They are nonpartisan. They are professionals. They've been attacked. And I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit. What is that like for you in this job that sometimes the election goes for the Democrat, sometimes it goes for the Republican, and helping people understand that it really is a nonpartisan system that's about making sure every vote gets counted. And the winner is declared the winner.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is transparency, making sure that we're supporting clerks in their effort to be more transparent as well. Our systems are so secure, not just in Michigan, but around the country, that we do have paper ballots that can be recounted. We have post-election audits. It is really sometimes, I don't know, funny when people be like, you need to have paper ballots, and we don't try, and we're like, we have paper ballots. And so there's like but at the same time, our clerks are we have 1,500 clerks in the state of Michigan, 83 county clerks as well. And all of them have been on the front lines of the threats that have emerged from people's misunderstanding of the process and their unhappiness when their chosen candidate doesn't win. That's made all the more difficult when the candidate themselves refuses to acknowledge defeat, and thereby sort of also sends a message that it's okay to do that it's now, I wouldn't say the norm. It's because we're far from that at this point, but it is still strangely, I don't know, I don't want to say weird because that's like become a thing also, but it's like unnerving that people seem to think it's okay to not accept valid election results, especially when it's been proven to be valid and accurate time and time again. But that said, recognizing at the state level, actually Jennifer Brunner, the Secretary of Ohio, when I wrote my book, told me at the time that our job at the state level is to serve as that lightning rod, kind of absorbing all of the attacks on behalf of the local officials in an effort to protect them from it. And that some of what we've tried to do in our state, both from a narrative standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from a legal standpoint, to take the hits on their behalf, then also give them funds. We've distributed $8 million of funding, for example, to improve the security of our local officials' offices and other things, recruit election officials and recruit poll workers. We've recruited 90,000 poll workers in Michigan alone since 2020, and then send that talent to the local jurisdictions so that they can hire more people to help them work. So we try to be an ally in action, and then, a protector as well in spirit. And that helps, I think, us navigate this challenging time. It doesn't eliminate the challenges, but certainly makes it sort of expands that team democracy ethos, I guess, and expands it to make it easier for folks on the ground.
Yeah. So we do a lot of polling at States United and research about what voters understand about the elections process, where they feel like they want more information. And a thing we hear a lot is people don't really understand a lot of things about I mean, we need to do a much better job of civics education in this country. I think we agree on that. But they have a lot of questions in particular about after they cast their ballot, what happens to it. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the work you do educating voters. We're about to come out with a series of videos, explainer videos, which I know you're going to be featured in at States United. And it's just one tiny piece of a much broader effort that secretaries really help lead to help Americans understand, to answer their questions, but really also at the end of the day to restore trust and faith in the process, because democracy depends on public trust. And as you said, there's been some real erosion of that trust.
There has, and I would argue it's strategically been deployed to undermine people's faith in their own voices, their votes, and the process of elections and democracy. So I think, one, it's important for us to see what we're really fighting, which isn't just, this era in which candidates have suddenly decided that they don't want to accept election results. It's connected to a broader, I would argue, even global effort to undermine this idea, this promise of people having the power in a democracy to elect their leaders and hold them accountable. So what we're protecting is really that promise for every citizen, and in doing so, what we're trying to do is educate folks about at the granular level just how secure their systems are. But what we found is, though the facts and the data are on the side of election security, and every question that someone genuinely has about their ballot and what happens to it after it's cast and how they can be confident it's counted and that only valid votes are counted, all of those questions are answerable with data and facts and evidence. But sometimes that's not enough. So what we learned in 2020 and was really reinforced in 2022 is that we not only have to, for lack of better words, equip ourselves, I guess I'd say, with those facts and that information, but we also need more people, messengers from all walks of life to be those warriors with that information. So we as election officials, we can get you all the information we need to know. What you need to know, we need more voices, we need more trusted messengers beyond just us to get that information out there, because we're battling, as you all know, an influx from various different message points of this bad information to citizens. And then thirdly, we need to, in that same regard, not just build out more trusted messengers, but we need to build out more mechanisms for delivering that information. So obviously social media, obviously videos, all of those things, but developing other ways to transmit the information with those trusted voices has also been a focus of ours. So in Michigan, for example, we launched the Voter Confidence Council. It equips faith leaders, business leaders, community leaders, and others with even sports figures with information, granular information about what happens to your ballot after you cast it. How can you check to make sure it was counted? What does it mean to be an election worker? What are post-election audits? And we use these voices and empower these other voices to say to your synagogue, mosque, or church, this is what we're seeing in elections. Or we invite business leaders, many of whom are Republicans, and conservative leaders in our state, to simply just say, this is what happens, and this is why you should have confidence in our elections. We even have Republican state senators in our state who have held hearings that reinforce the integrity of our elections and the accuracy of their results, to answer questions, but also finalize the truth. So we're trying to equip all those different mechanisms and just work harder to get the truthful information out. The other piece of that, of course, is that a lot of times that additional work is burdening election administrators whose job it is to administer elections. We're not necessarily the communications gurus that this moment is requiring us all to be, but we have to become that, and it's expanded our responsibilities. It's made the jobs much more complex for our local election officials, but it is what the moment requires. And we're grateful for national partners who help us meet that moment with the types of information and strategies that we need.
Do you worry about, I'm sure you do worry about, can you talk a little bit about how the rise of AI is impacting that disinformation, misinformation trend? And how are you, we hear a lot about AI, it's here. So how are you preparing for administering an election, and both responding to the threats that
Mhm.
AI poses, but also are there ways in which you feel like you can harness it for good when it
Yeah,
comes to
I think
your
that's
work?
that's a really important thing to not neglect in this moment. I mean, first and foremost, we need to educate and empower citizens to become critical consumers of information. So that means having exercises and scenario planning with officials as to what to do when you see AI, talking about it in every audience that I go to about what AI is, how to spot it, what to do about it, and how to essentially be skeptical when you see things that don't seem quite right. Even images of polling results that we're seeing is artificially manipulated to confuse people. So one is awareness and education about how to spot it. Two, however, is we need real strong legal tools to protect citizens and protect our elections against the negative use and misuse of AI. In Michigan, we are one of 5 or 6 states that have banned the intentional use of AI to disseminate false information about candidates' positions or election administration procedures. So that gives us a line in the sand. It doesn't mean people might not try to violate that law, but when they do, we're able to get something taken down as something that's banned in the state of Michigan. We're working with Senator Klobuchar and Senator Hawley and others on a bipartisan bill federally to expand that nationwide. But in the absence of action from the federal government, our states are stepping up. We've also required in our state a disclosure and disclaimer of anything that is any political communications that is generated with AI, so that at the very least people can see, oh, that's not really a true image. That's something that's been made through artificial intelligence. And then finally, we have to work with law enforcement and create real ways for people to report things in a real-time way so that we can get them taken down and then respond to the misinformation with facts. It's not unlike what we do when false robocalls or flyers go to communities that say election day has been moved. We have a plan in place to try to mitigate the negative impact of that type of misinformation. So it creates another battlefront in that regard as well, that we're working with law enforcement and having the other tools and engage skeptical citizenry and laws on the books that ban intentionally manipulated images and deepfakes help us in that last piece.
So speaking of law enforcement, I want to touch on the climate of threats and political violence right now. I'm going to read just a few statistics, which are pretty sobering. 1 in 3 election officials have experienced threats, harassment, or abuse because of their job, self-reported. More than a quarter are worried about their own families or loved ones being threatened or harassed. 1 in 5 Americans say that violence may be necessary to get the country back on track. And 2/3 of Americans are worried about post-election violence. This is something, unfortunately, you've experienced firsthand. Almost all of our clients have at States United, whether statewide or county or local. What has it been? And at States United, I should say, we have a public safety and elections project that's focused on training law enforcement leaders to respond to threats of violence, to be prepared to add election protection as part of their portfolio. Really not something they had to do in the past. If you talk to like the chief in Green Bay, for example, Wisconsin, he'll say, well, I was used to protecting football games. That was always part of my job, but I wasn't used to protecting elections. And he is one of many leaders across the country who've stepped up, who've helped us train his peers across the country to be prepared, whether it's protecting election infrastructure, being prepared for things like protests at counting facilities, being aware of who local election officials are and whether they might need help or protection. But you've had people show up at your house, you've dealt with plenty of threats. How do you experience that? How do you deal with it? And what do you see as some of the solutions here?
Well, I think there are legal solutions, and there's also personal solutions. I started my career, as I mentioned, in Montgomery, Alabama, and so it's never been far from my mind that the fight for democracy has always been interwoven with incidents of violence and threats. And all I'd ever wanted to be growing up, and even now, was someone who would have stood at the foot of that bridge in Selma, Alabama, and faced down, in that case, Alabama state troopers to march forward anyway in furtherance of a democracy that protected the voice of every citizen. So it's never been lost on me that that commitment often does entail threats and challenges and even violence. It's certainly very different when that happens outside your home in the dark of night in a snowy December evening when you're inside with your 4-year-old decorating your Christmas tree. But at the same time, it's connected because there is nothing more powerful in our country than the power of citizens to vote in a healthy and robust democracy. And as a result, there will always be people with power who will try to diminish that through threats, through violence, through force, and other ways. That said, what we can do in moments like that, what I found personally is using those threats, using that fear even that they induce to embolden our commitment to this work and to strengthen us. Meaning, the night when I was sheltering inside my home, I thought, oh my gosh, these folks aren't protesting me. They're protesting the results of this election. They don't like what the majority of voters in Michigan had to say. And you know what? My job is to make sure that even if people don't like it, the will of the voters prevails. And I'll proudly do that every day. I'll proudly sign up to do that every day. And so it felt a emboldening and even intensified dedication to that work as a result of those threats, which is, in my view, one of the best ways to make sure that they don't have their intended effect, which is to fear, intimidate, and cause us to shrink. The other side of that, of course, is making sure law enforcement and laws on the books protect us as well. So we've done a couple of things in Michigan, and I know several other states have as well. We've enacted legislation to make it a law, to make it a crime to threaten an election worker in their line of work. So now, if people were to try to threaten me in doing my job, they'd be arrested. They'd be able to be held accountable, criminally accountable. And secondly, we've held tabletop exercises, scenario planning, all around our state, from northern Michigan to Detroit to West Michigan to everywhere in between, with law enforcement, first responders, and clerks, building the relationships. So if nothing else, folks know who to call. I've also reached out to mayors around our state so that they're aware of their responsibility and helping to make sure people feel protected. It's just kind of all of us wrapping ourselves around the voters in the process and making sure everyone is using their tools to protect it, and that we have laws on the books again to provide force to that work if we need to, or if things escalate.
I know that in some states like Arizona, we've seen real turnover of election officials, especially county election officials. Have you seen that in Michigan? Are you seeing attrition? Part of the goal, I think, is to drive out good, nonpartisan, pro-democracy leaders as well. I know you're very brave, and the Attorney General and the governor, who both also dealt with this, are as well. But not everyone signed up for this. If you were just wanting to be a county or local election official, shouldn't really be part of the job description. So what have you seen?
Yeah, we're
in
kind
your
of seeing
state?
both. I mean, we've seen, for example, right now, a number of clerk positions that are open in our state that no one is running for. If they become vacant, we'll of course appoint someone or make sure someone's there to do the job. But you see this diminution of interest in doing this job in many parts of our state. Other parts of the state, we're seeing an increase in interest. 90,000 people signing up to be election workers over the last several years, poll workers in communities all across our state. New clerks stepping in who signed up intentionally because they wanted to do this work with pride to defend democracy. So it's like anything. We're seeing, people are choosing who they want to be in this moment. And so my job, my hope is that we can get the majority of us to lean in, to step up and engage, because that is really the only thing that will ensure our democracy is able to withstand not just this moment, but other pressure points in the future. But yeah, and to, when people do step up, make sure they feel protected, secure, and supported, but recognize that not everyone's going to make that choice, and to have plans in place if people do choose to disengage. What has been very helpful is having national partners and partners in other states as well, to ensure when someone does become new, because what a vacancy means is turnover and a new person enters the position, that they have the support they need to get up to speed and do the job with integrity, knowing what it entails. And so we have a saying on our staff to take every challenge and make it a win. Use every blow of an arrow to make yourself stronger. And I see that there as well, where we see a vacancy, we see it as an opportunity to replace someone who's left with someone who is perhaps new, fresh-faced, but energized to do the work. And then we help equip them with the tools they need to succeed.
And I think it's important to emphasize, as someone who works closely with law enforcement, and also we've had protesters at our house, that the response from law enforcement has been really strong. That
Mhm.
this is not
Yeah.
something that they typically did in the past, but
Right.
now that the resources are there and the training is there, there really has been a message of zero tolerance, which is in line with what the vast majority of Americans want and believe.
It
It's like
is, yeah.
93% of people say there should never be threats or harassment against election officials. So I really believe not only do Americans fundamentally believe in the system, but we have reached a point where the level of coordination is really strong, and it's gonna look different this time.
Mhm. I hope so. I mean, we're facing a more sophisticated operation as well.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
coordinated with more, I would argue, foreign interference likely than ever before, because as we're seeing play out in different ways, our foreign adversaries have a direct interest in who leads our country in the future. Directly impacts their plans for Ukraine and elsewhere. So we have to recognize and be clear-eyed about that incentive that's very real, and try to protect folks accordingly. But the other side of it is it's now the third election cycle where many of us have been going through this and dealing with these challenges, law enforcement as well. And we've only gotten better along the way too, and more strategic and more sophisticated, and have had more join our ranks as well who share that level of sophistication and commitment. So it'll be interesting to see how the next 100 or so days and beyond play out. But we're ready for whatever comes.
It's not even 100.
I'm looking like this election for us.
Elections
'Cause-
last a long time now.
Because we have, I mean, one of the things we didn't do in 20, one of the things we really underestimated was the extent to which the post-election process
Yes.
would play out as long as it did. And what I remember many things. One of the sort of Groundhog Day-like things that it felt like was like every time we would quote defeat an effort at the state, local, federal level to overturn our election results, would be like, okay, we're good. And then like the next day, there would be another lawsuit filed or another phone call made or another pressure point inflicted. And so it was just exhausting, even to the point by the time we got to January 5th, there was an election in Georgia, right? And we saw the election of Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. And we were like, okay, we're good on January 5th, right? And then, so what that taught us, of course, is to be prepared for anything and to not see, there's no
Yeah.
end date to this work.
Right, right.
It may be the inauguration, but even
Yeah.
then.
Were there, during that time, did you sort of have faith all the way through, or were there any moments where you were like, maybe this
Yeah.
is going to be, maybe this effort to undermine our system is going to be successful? And did you feel hopeful? Did you feel powerless? Like what were you
Both,
feeling?
all
Yeah.
the above. I mean, I remember a call we had with Dana Nessel I at some point after the election, or in the sort of November, December, and she just was listening to the potential plans of these alternate slate of electors and all the rest that was unfolding in our state, and the efforts to block the certification of our elections that would perhaps open up the legislature, which was Republican led at the time, to put a false slate. We knew the strategy, and it was, we were watching it unfold, and she said, oh my gosh, they shouldn't say that, but I don't swear. Oh my gosh, they might win. And they might succeed. And I just hear that stuff and I'm like, they will not on our watch. But there is that acknowledgement that we don't know. And I still say throughout this year, like there's a lot of uncertainty right now in this work. But what I have certainty about is our commitment to doing everything we can. And just as they're using every tactic, using every lever that we've got as well to protect the process and that fundamental promise of our Constitution of the will of the people ruling the day. And we have the truth and the facts on our side. The results of the 2020 election were unequivocal and clear. We had the law on our side. The law was to protect those results. We had the vast majority of people on the side of wanting to see the results of the election come to fruition and not be overturned. So we went into a battle, a metaphorical battle, with the right tools we needed to win. But what our success would depend on ultimately were people of integrity on both sides of the aisle, local clerks, certifiers on our state board of canvassers, and others, for their fortitude to withstand the pressures they were being put under, and still do the right thing anyway. For Brad Raffensperger to say no when he was asked to find 11,000 votes, like that's ultimately what things depended on, what our success depended on. And the beauty of 2020 is it really illuminated that when we do reach a pressure point, good people step up, regardless of their political affiliation, and protect who we are. And that gives me that faith
Yeah.
that we'll continue to see that play out. But what our history tells us and teaches us is that we may succeed, but it's still going to be a tough, metaphorically bloody battle on the way to that success. And we have to gear up for that. And that's a lot of what we've been trying to do in our state.
So we have to gear up again for election
Yeah.
season,
Mhm.
not election day. It's going to be
Yeah.
another one where we have probably a prolonged helping people understand it takes time. We need to count every vote and, not sort of expecting that night we're going to have the answer.
Yeah, that certainly, that if we don't have the results on election night, it's because election workers in our states are working diligently to count every valid vote and to secure the process and make sure we've got all the procedures in place to withstand any additional scrutiny that comes our way. But notably, all of that, I think, requires us to understand the intricacies of and the mechanics of our elections that go far beyond sort of the flashy news reports or, final tallies that media or candidates seek to get out there. And so, yeah, I think understanding the process and understanding that the process is longer because of secure redundancies and layers of checks and balances. It's a good thing, in other words, that it takes some time to count our votes, because the last thing we want to do is rush through a process that could be then rife with error and give folks results that later have to be amended or adjusted because the process went too quickly and we ignored secure protocols that we, for reason, have in place to make sure the process goes well.
And to your point about the American people, one of the things that gets me out of bed every day is for 4 years now, we've been polling what percentage of people want every vote counted more than they want their preferred candidate to win. And it's always above 75%. And that's stayed really consistent over time. So that fundamental belief in the system is there. You have the people behind you. There's a faction in this country that's looking to undermine, but it's a faction. And I think it's important to remember that. So we're on a college campus.
I would add, and it's a faction that's always been there.
It's always
It's a
been there.
faction
That's right.
that, showed up in Selma and
Yeah.
that pushed back against voting rights and civil rights 60 years ago. It's a faction that, has manifested itself in different ways throughout American history.
Yeah.
And we have to sort of see that connectivity too.
Maybe more of a platform, more of a bully pulpit now.
Yeah.
So we're on a college campus and you were the dean of a law school. How do you see the role of education in strengthening democracy? And maybe you can talk a little bit too about how do we energize young people, voters, the next generation, and not just voters, but the next generation of public servants, How do you think about that aspect of your work?
Well, I think my parents were special education teachers, so I grew up around educators. It was no surprise to them or me that I ended up as a law professor, even at the young age of 27, which I was when I started teaching.
That's crazy, by the way.
And then became a dean less than 10 years later. I was 35 at the time.
Also crazy.
And the funny thing was, at the time I was like, oh, I'm 35, I haven't accomplished anything. It's getting older. Anyway, I was
No, not really.
I remember like being, anyway, feeling that way. But that said, I think education is critical. We're all educators in different ways. As election administrators, we're educators. In the media and journalists, we're educators. We all have a responsibility to help others see and understand our world. And so educational institutions, communities like this one, are key at bringing us together to have informative conversations like this, and if anything, my hope as I sort of build out my portfolio for what I want to do in the future is really also investing more heavily in making sure everyone has access to robust and full and quality education at every level, because we can't have a robust and healthy democracy if we don't have a robust and healthy education system in our country or in any state. And that includes civics education, and it includes messaging and education to young people as well as all of us about the critical role we have to play as citizens in protecting and preserving our democracy, voting, staying engaged, helping others do the same, and being informed about the real challenges we face and being a part of trying to make those solutions real. All of that is what civic engagement is about. And I've been really inspired to see, folks like Governor Healy and Governor Moore in Maryland do a lot to really amplify service, servant leadership, and civics education is a way of engaging the next generation in being prepared to inherit and protect and defend our democracy in the years ahead.
We're going to open it up for questions in 1 minute, but will you tell these guys about your sticker contest? Because I love that.
Yeah, another way.
That's one small example of how we
Yeah,
get
well,
people
so it's
energized.
interesting. We have a college student task force, a young person advisory board at the department, where we bring young people and college students together on a regular basis. We've done this since 2019 to advise us on what we should be doing. And one of the things that came out of the task force this year, one of the ideas was the sticker competition, which they then completely developed and led. And we saw thousands of people submit drawings, thousands more vote on what they want the I voted sticker in November to look like, and amazing ideas too, right? Like artistry and imagery and symbolism. And so we'll see, but and some other states have done it too. It's a great way to get people embracing and their responsibility to vote and also excited about it. And so we'll see. You have to go to michigan.gov/I voted sticker, I think it is, or just michigan.gov/vote to find out more.
The entries are really great. It's
Yeah.
really cool. Sean, do you want us to open
We don't
it up?
have Voting McVoteface.
Voting McVoteface.
Remember
I
that
love
one?
that.
That was the British effort to name a boat, and they wanted it to be Voting McVoteface. Anyway,
love that.
sorry. We were worried that we'd get like a sticker McStick face or something. This is anyway.
Great. We'll
Yeah.
start questions now, and I'll just ask the audience to speak into the mic.
Thank you for an illuminating and inspiring discussion. I enjoyed hearing about the trifecta in Michigan and work in Massachusetts and Ohio. Without naming names of particular attorney generals or secretaries of state, are there states where you are worried about election integrity being a priority among those who administer them?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's really been, I'll just say this. When I became Secretary of State, one of the things I was most excited to do was join the National Association of Secretaries of State. And it was for many months, a incredible way for folks to come together from both sides of the aisle and share best practices and support each other. And I was really hurt in 2020 when Brad Raffensperger stuck his neck out as he did and stood up for the votes in Georgia. And very few other secretaries on his side of the aisle, only one actually, came to his defense and supported him. And that was the beginning of a fraying, I think, where we started to see more partisan secretaries elected. And I do worry, as I've seen 2 or 3 of my colleagues choose to be politicians over being professional in moments like these, that's not going to help us ensure faith and confidence in our processes across the board. And it's going to be a challenge we have to encounter in the next few months. But what I'm very optimistic about is that if you look at the battleground states, the 6 states where the most amount of scrutiny is going to be and the spotlight is going to be in the next several months, we're all good friends, allies, connected professionals. We talk several times a day sometimes. In Georgia, Pennsylvania, 2 Republicans leading elections there, in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Democrats, but all committed to professionalism and nonpartisanship in our administration. So that is what I hold on to. And that's really the community I found to be one where we're aligned in our work and protecting each other and supporting each other in this challenging moment.
And I'll just add, this, what we call election denial, which has become a campaign platform for many and sort of a political tool, is really pretty wildly unpopular among the American electorate. And so we watched during the midterms and I'm here in my role as head of States United Democracy Center, but we also have a 501c4 entity called States United Action, where we track election deniers running across all different levels of government, electiondeniers.org. And one of the things we saw during the midterms was that those candidates were defeated in all the statewide races in the battleground states. And when you asked voters, when you gave them just minimal information about a candidate, they would vote along party lines. But once you started to explain to them, this person has taken this position or participated in the insurrection, et cetera, favorability declined hugely. So, I think voters are tired of hearing these lies about elections. It doesn't mean that they don't have impact. They certainly do. But I think at the end of the day, the work that Secretary Benson and her colleagues do is really valued and trusted. And again, we have to find ways to get to the heart of that and explain it to people.
I've really enjoyed hearing from you today. One topic that you did not touch on was voting machines. And I would like very much to hear your opinion on privatization of voting machines. We have a monopoly of basically 3 partisan companies that own the machines, that have secret source codes, that have access to maintenance and fixing the machines. And we lack sometimes the ability to do forensic audits because they say, this is our secret, you can't open this machine. So I'm wondering your opinion on how to bring more transparency into this whole area.
Yeah, and transparency is so important, and it's our friend, because the more transparency we have, the more people who are focused on seeing just how secure all our voting machines actually are and identifying the facts behind that, the more confidence we can rightly build among citizens who have suspicions. So in Michigan, for example, before every election, there was a public test of the machines where people can see them tested and see their accuracy verified. All citizens vote on paper ballots, which enables necessary recounts after the fact, as well as post-election audits, which we conduct statewide, risk-limiting audits. And then third, with those audits that are conducted by professionals who understand what they're seeing and know what they're looking to and need to see to verify, that those audits help us also reaffirm the accuracy of our results. After the 2020 election, we conducted 250 audits at the state and local level, verifying not just the accuracy of our machines' ability to count paper ballots, but also the procedures that go into verifying ballots and ensuring that only valid votes count. A state Senate effort also did a similar investigation, as did our state auditor, into the accuracy of our voting machines, all of which reaffirmed that they work, and they work with integrity and they count ballots accurately. The good news is, on the other side of that, for folks who have suspicions, there is so much scrutiny at this point that certainly if there was anything awry, it would have been discovered. But we'll continue to be vigilant in providing that transparency for citizens, because we know they have questions, and we want everyone to have that rightly placed faith in our processes and our results.
I wish we could have you times 50. Just, it's just phenomenal, really, listening to you and what you're doing. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. What are your thoughts about the recent issues with the Supreme Court and how it might affect the election or just our future democracy?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I have 3 faces in my mind as I hear that question. I'll just say that. As someone who went to, I was there for oral arguments twice this year around different election law cases and saw all the justices up close. Elena Kagan was my first law professor at Harvard. She was my civil procedure professor. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is one of the most brilliant jurists I've ever seen, and I've seen her litigate up close, ask questions, smart questions, fair questions, surprising questions. She's amazing. And Sonia Sotomayor has also similarly demonstrated her toughness and commitment to integrity. I hope in the future we'll see more justices like them, and hope springs eternal with every election that can come to fruition. And we'll see how these currently proposed reforms to the Supreme Court play out as well. But I think it's without question, and I say this as a lawyer and as someone who used to run a law school and train future lawyers, you need to have all the courts respected and operating in a true ethical way. Ethical standards, if nothing else, for our justices that are enforceable must be, are critical to get into place. If for no other reason than to ensure and restore the public's faith in that institution. So I'm hopeful that there's more focus on it than ever before. You've got some amazing justices on that court who are raising their voice in every way and doing incredible work. So we'll see how the years evolve from here. But certainly there's no question that it's an institution that is facing a crisis in this moment where people have lost faith in its ability to ethically and do its job with integrity.
I'll add two things. The first is the Supreme Court is critical, but there's many other courts that are also going to be critical this cycle. In 2020, when we watched all the challenges to the results and those cases were all, dismissed, it was judges at all different levels who heard those cases. And so the judiciary is going to be really key. As someone who, spent 4 years suing the Trump administration when I was Deputy Attorney General, and we won 80% of those cases. The courts have changed. The courts are going to be critical, and they have changed across the board. So something that I'm glad you asked the question, something we all need to be keeping our eyes on. And now I feel kind of like Pollyanna on the panel. But we also had a really big case recently before the Supreme Court called Moore v. Harper that could have given immense power to state legislatures to control federal elections. And it would have been really devastating for our system of checks and balances and nonpartisan election administration. I want to give a shout out to the head of our legal team at States United, who's here. Her name is Christine Sun. I don't know where she is, but she's somewhere in the audience. And we, helped represent the state of North Carolina in that case. And the Supreme Court did not do what it could have done. It did a pretty good version of what the various outcomes could have been. So again, I think it's going to be really important for everyone, like all of you, to be speaking out and having your voices be heard about the importance of democracy, because that advocacy, that really matters. The work of the media really matters. We're gonna see those challenges again this cycle for sure.
Hi, Secretary Benson. Your state of Michigan has a paper ballot and machines that scan them. My home state of New York seems to have a similar system. We have a paper ballot. Amongst your colleagues and the other 48 states, how many are overseeing similar systems where they have paper ballots that they can fall back on?
It's something like close to 98% of all voters vote with paper ballots. I think it's only New Hampshire, Alabama, and Mississippi
I think that's right.
that don't. And so it's a marked change from 2020 or 2016, where even in Georgia, you had electronic voting machines. They've now been replaced with paper ballots. So every voter in a battleground state will be voting with paper ballot, and the vast majority of voters, with the exception of those 3 states, will have paper ballots this election.
I want to distinguish that.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Are we at time?
Oh, one second, Hal. Just Hal, if you,
By Schiller.
Microphone.
Oh, a book out by Schiller. He's a professor at University of Maryland, called White Rural Rage. And I'm particularly interested how you plan to handle that in Michigan, where you really are on a 50-50 basis. That's going to be critical of Pennsylvania as well, where I grew up. So
I grew up in Pittsburgh.
So
yeah,
you look at the map of Pennsylvania and it's all red except a few blue spots. And that creates 50-50 more or less.
You know, I won my reelection in 2022 with a 14-point margin. And I won a lot of those red parts of the state of Michigan, including 3 counties. The governor didn't win, but
But who's counting, really?
we love the governor. I don't mean to be, I mean, she won by double digits as well, as did Dana. Oh, Dana won by 9 points, and she calls herself 9-point Nestle. So anyway, I digress. My point is that all 3 of us have been able to, and Democrats across our state have been able to ensure, I guess you could say, that we're making the case to all citizens that we just want government to work well and be above the fray and deliver. I mean, the governor's tagline, "Fix the roads," right, was like, which she has done, underscores that more than partisan differences, what I believe the vast majority of citizens, not just in Michigan, but nationwide, really want is just a government that works well. I oversee the DMV in Michigan, makes me very, very popular. Everyone. But what I did, I took office, went to every single one of my 130 DMV offices and saw firsthand how broken it was. We had people waiting in line 7 hours to get an address change on their driver's license. It was a mess, and we fixed it. Within a year and a half, we eliminated wait times. We put more services online. We put kiosks in grocery stores to renew tabs when you do your grocery shopping, your license tabs, a number of other things to simply just ensure when you have to interact with the state, it goes smoothly and efficiently, and we can demonstrate, actually, we're here to help. We're not here to be in your way. And that has been, and then again, it's the same strategy the governor has done with fixing the roads and making sure, like, we're just making sure you can drive and you don't get stuck in a pothole. That's kind of our fundamental jobs, in addition to standing up for the fundamental rights and freedoms of all our citizens, which we've also proudly done. And so all that to say, I think, and I found in Michigan, as I think growing up in Pennsylvania taught me as well, that there's far much more that we have in common and that we want collectively from our leaders than we disagree on. And it's up to us as leaders to not lean into the partisanship and the rancor that so many do utilize to win elections, and instead just keep our heads down and try to do our jobs well for everyone. That has helped us break through. I mean, obviously, I started my career investigating white separatist organizations throughout the country, so I'm fully aware also of extremism and that reality as well. But I still believe, perhaps in part because of that work, that government must work for everyone, and our responsibility as leaders is to make sure we can deliver results for everyone and give everyone a fair shot to prosper in a fair and healthy economy and a good education system. So that's what I'm going to continue to do, and I think the most successful leaders in our country and in our state will do that as well.
Amen. And I think to the point about restoring trust in democracy, the best way we do that actually is just to show people as many examples as we can of government working for them.
Exactly.
Hi. Last night on MSNBC, Mika Brzezinski showed 2 clips of Trump at rallies where he ominously told his followers not to vote. He said, "Don't bother voting, stay home." How do you react to so blatant a threat to such signaling to the end of our democracy?
I mean, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. That's what I'm saying. I mean, look, we've said around for years, democracy is on the ballot. The votes and the decisions citizens across our country will make this year will determine the future of our democracy. And I think the messages of various different candidates in this moment are reinforcing that truth. So that's why now more than ever, it's important not just to participate, not just to help us counter misinformation, but to recognize all of us have an important role to play in defining who we're going to be as a country in the years ahead. And that definition will be made, I believe, by this year's election. And my job is simply just to make sure that everyone can vote and to trust the results and to make sure those results are accurate, whatever they may be, but also to make clear to the American people what's at stake and how important it is that they embrace their role of protecting and defending democracy in this moment.
I love that. Is that it, Sean? Got it? That's it.
All right,
Thank you
thanks,
all so
everyone.
much for being here. Thank you.
Thank
Secretary
you.
Benson, for making the trip.
If I can just say thank you to Jocelyn and to Joanna. I found that to be enormously educational and energizing. I just want to remind everyone that we have the Summer Institute bookstore. So wonderful books by our distinguished guests could be found over there. And then just please come back this evening to hear what I know is going to be a scintillating conversation between Tim Alberta and Marie Griffith, the kingdom, the power, and the glory. See you then.